I live in LA, in the suburbs. It's a nice neighborhood, mostly Iranian Jewish, fairly wealthy. But still, it's not unusual to hear the ghetto bird late at night. Only this night, the airship was right over our house, and the spotlight kept shining back and forth. I had my wife and toddler son asleep in the room with me. Neither of them woke up. I thought it might be best to pull the shotgun out of the safe and get her loaded up just to be sure. I grabbed my Remington pump and loaded it with double-aught buck and a slug. I went out to the living room, locking the bedroom door behind me. We have a house lock on the bedroom door. I turned out all the interior lights and turned on all the exterior lights in the yard. And I just stood there shirtless in my pajama bottoms with a shotgun, occasionally walking up to the windows on either side of the house. The helo just kept circling and the spotlight kept darting back and forth. I sat down in a chair and within a minute started to doze off when I saw a figure run by my sliding glass door from my backyard towards my side yard. I ran through my kitchen and realized my side door to my garage was open. I unlocked the door to the garage and went in to try and lock the door to the side yard. He was already at the door, turning the knob and pushing. The knob is tricky. Even when it's unlocked, the door itself is swollen from rain exposure and old framing, and it's difficult to open. I racked the shotgun, pointed it at the door window, and yelled, "Stop!" I reached forward for the tactical flashlight that was mounted on the shotgun. Of course, the batteries were dead. Duh. Maintain your weapons, folks. I recoiled back towards the water heater. I figured if he came through that door, I'd have to shoot him. There would be no choice. If I didn't, and he overpowered me, the door behind me was unlocked and he'd have access to the house and a shotgun. We all think we're going to be heroic and steadfast and resilient in that moment, and I probably would have stood my ground because I had my wife and son to protect. But the last thing I wanted right then was to pull the trigger and hear the blast and have a man die violently in my house. What would my life be like? How would it change? Would I have to get lawyers, lose my house, worry about retribution, have to look over my shoulder? I sometimes lay awake at night thinking of a blunder I said in a conversation, or a mistake I made driving. Would I relive the moment I killed a guy? Over and over again, while I was trying to sleep? The problem solved itself. The guy stood there, hand on the door but looking behind him, as the cops rushed up to the side gate. Flashlights, lots of yelling, 10 different commands all being screamed at the same time. They reached over, got the gate unlocked, and the guy was on the ground. I put my shotgun down on the other side of the door. A female officer shined her light through the side door window and yelled, "Sir, get inside!" I went back into the kitchen, locked the door behind me. I cracked a beer and took a long plug off a bottle of tequila. They arrested the guy and the helo called off, and after an hour or so, they were all gone and it was quiet except for a few neighbors all kibitzing in Hebrew and Farsi outside. I went outside and locked the gate and went back to bed, dry mouth and heart racing. My wife woke up finally, asked why I hadn't been sleeping. "I'm fine, just insomnia." I didn't want to tell her. Not at 3 a.m. She'd freak out, and at that moment, that was the last thing I wanted. I called the next day to see if I could get any details. The watch commander told me that the guy was a 16-year-old kid from the neighborhood. Later, I found out he ran around with my neighbor's kids. No previous record, wealthy parents, but got caught breaking into his friend's house, took the cops on a chase, ditched his car a block away, and ran like hell. My yard was probably the darkest and most shaded, so he hid there. I never mentioned the shotgun or almost killing him. The less they knew, the better, far as I was concerned. The kid would be a man in his early 30s now. I've never seen him, but the kids he ran with all have kids of their own now, and drive minivans and have careers and walk to synagogue on Shabbat. I hope he's doing better. He may or may not know that he was one door's threshold away from a violent and painful death. I want him to know, but I don't want him to know, you know? When I was 14, it was an average night around 9 p.m. when I found myself babysitting my little cousin at his house. My mom and aunt were out shopping, and my dad and uncle had gone to the movie theater. As we sat there, an unusual feeling washed over me. Something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Despite the discomfort, I kept watching TV with my cousin. The unsettling feeling wasn't subsiding, prompting me to get up and secure the back door. However, upon my return through the kitchen, I discovered what was triggering my unease. A decrepit-looking man who appeared to be homeless was standing outside the window, peering in. His gaze was eerily fixed on my cousin. Immediately, I entered protective mode. I pretended not to see the man and suggested to my little cousin that we go upstairs. I explained that our parents would be home soon and wouldn't want him staying up late. So, I took him upstairs and tucked him into bed, all the while knowing there was a man outside who posed a potential threat. At the time, I was around 125 pounds, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and played football for my school. If I remember correctly, I rushed downstairs and into the kitchen, where I grabbed a meat tenderizing hammer. Upon returning to the window where I had seen the man, he was nowhere in sight. I quickly checked that the front door was locked, ensuring both the deadbolt and knob were secure. Back upstairs, I stationed myself in my cousin's room, sitting down in front of the door. When he asked what I was doing, I reassured him, telling him not to worry and to keep his head low. I then made 2 phone calls, one to the police and another to my dad and uncle. The police said they would take half an hour, while my dad and uncle were 45 minutes away. Then I heard a window shatter and the distinct sound of heavy boots moving around on the main floor. I instructed my cousin to stay calm, hide under the covers, and remain silent. The sound of the intruder walking around downstairs was horrifying. Clutching the meat tenderizer tightly, I waited. About 5 minutes passed before I heard the boots ascending the stairs. At that point, my heart was pounding in my chest. The door to my cousin's room was no more than 10 feet from the stairs. I listened as the intruder opened the doors to my aunt and uncle's room, then the bathroom. Next, I heard him descend the stairs and open the door to the basement. 15 agonizing minutes later, the police arrived and stormed the house. It turned out the intruder was a man who had escaped from a mental hospital in a province nearby. My older sibling and I were staying at home in a small town in Ohio. This town had fewer people than my mom's graduating class from the city we moved from. My sibling was grounded, with both the house phone and their cell phone locked in my dad's gun safe. We didn't know the combination. The reason for the grounding was something silly and arbitrary. I can't remember quite why. Our grandparents lived down the street, and our great-grandmother lived in a small house they built for her on their property. It was a setup for her to be independent, but still close by. That day, my parents said they were going to check on my great-grandmother because our grandparents were out of town. Then they promised they would come back and we would order pizza. This sounded like a good plan to 7-year-old me and my 14 or 15-year-old sibling. We played video games for a while, but started to get hungry and wondered when our parents would return. After about 2 hours of their absence, I heard a knock at the door. I went downstairs, excited for the food, and my sibling followed after saving the game. I walked up to the door, which had a large window, and saw a stranger. He was a tall, lean, white man in his mid-20s, with short black hair and scruffy facial hair. This was unexpected because everyone knew everyone in our small town, and I didn't recognize him. I signaled 1 second and closed the curtain. My sibling was also surprised, as they had seen the stranger too. In a matter of seconds, the knocking turned into pounding and then escalated to shaking our doorknob. Terrified, and with no way to call our parents, my sibling grabbed my hand and led me into the kitchen. They grabbed a knife which broke in their hand, so they quickly grabbed another one. We hid in the laundry room, holding each other while listening to the banging and pounding. About 5 minutes later, which felt like hours, we heard the front door open. My sibling, always protective, was ready to defend us with the kitchen knife. However, my mom rounded the corner, holding 2 pizza boxes and wondering why her 2 kids were in a crumpled heap of tears on the floor. We rushed to her to explain about the man outside, yet we were met with laughter. My dad was outside talking to the man. He was asking about buying the broken-down car that had been in our driveway for a few months. He was apparently a mechanic. My mom felt terrible, but found the situation a bit amusing. Apparently, she told the man about the incident, and he said he felt bad for scaring us. After comforting us with hugs, we were promised that the phones wouldn't be locked away when they were out again. We spent the evening eating our pizza, still sobbing a bit, but something still bothers me. As an adult now, I question why an adult man would pound on the door that way, shake the handle, and try so hard to get into a house where either the parents weren't home or the youngest child had signaled 1 second to go get their parent. Why would someone want to discuss a car without any for sale sign on it? So late at night, around 9 or 10 p.m. I wonder if I was actually in danger that night. Looking back, it doesn't seem like typical adult behavior, and I can't help but fear what could have happened if my parents hadn't arrived home when they did.